What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another video. So no, you did not misread the title, guys. I wish I had better news, but you did not misread the title. There's a lot going on in the HEROES Act, and I'll start from the beginning. So if you're new to my channel, or if you're new to these videos I've been doing, updating everybody about what's going on with the stimulus, let me just start by telling you there's a new bill that has been introduced by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And when we first heard the bill, it sounded amazing. I mean, she gave this incredible speech.
We must also empathize with the pain of families who do not know where their next meals are coming from and how to pay next month's rent. It is imperative that we address the needs of the American people.
About how it's for the American people and how we need this, and for hurting people and hungry people, and you can't put the nation's money on pause. And it sounds amazing. I mean, everything on the surface sounds really beautiful. So on top of vowing to give 15% extra in food stamps and to forgive up to $10,000 in student loan debt, for some people up to $20,000. These things sound great, but underneath all of that, on the surface, there are more provisions in this bill that you might not be aware of, and I want to bring some of them to light today. So in this first video, we're going to talk about the release of inmates, and a lot of people might not have noticed that part in the bill, so I kind of want to break it down for you now. I do want to say, before I get all the way into the video, that as always, my videos are done with a bipartisan view. I try my best not to give my personal opinion, and if I do, I'm really quick to say that it is only my opinion. Also, I'm not favoring either party. I'm just here to talk about the money and how these provisions will affect us. So let's get started, and let's talk about the release of all these prisoners. Now, most of us got excited because the HEROES Act is proposing to give $1,200 to every American adult, as well as $1,200 to every American child. So most people are like, yay, more money. And then you have some people on the other side that are saying we deserve more money. And then there's yet another side that says we don't deserve any more money or we'll bankrupt our country. So we have all of these opposing ideas, and then Nancy Pelosi comes with the HEROES Act that wants to give $1,200 to every adult and child, up to $6,000 per family. So we were excited about that, but I told you guys in the last video I was going to do my best to read this bill. And guys, reading it, oh my goodness, the more I read, the more I cringe. That's just my opinion, but I cringe not because I don't agree with everything that's in there, but I cringe because I'm understanding why it's 1,800 pages long. It's almost like it's 1,800 pages long because our homegirl Nancy did not want us to take the time to read everything that's in this bill. Had it been shorter, a lot of us would have tackled it, but because it's so long, a lot of people are like, ain't nobody got time for that. I'm not reading this whole bill. And because of that, a lot of us are left in the dark about what's going on. So let's talk about the inmate thing, and we'll cover the immigration clauses, because there are hefty things about illegal immigrants and immigration and money for, oh my gosh, there's so much in here. We'll get to that on the next video, but let's talk about the inmates. Now, at first glance, this bill doesn't look terrible when you look at what it's saying about releasing inmates. They're talking about releasing the elderly, some juveniles who haven't committed violent offenses, and then they're also talking about releasing, the bill talks about releasing the vulnerable population, vulnerable and at risk, such as people with low immune systems, compromised immune systems, and at-risk people like pregnant women or inmates with certain disabilities. So that's something most people can turn a blind eye to and say, I ain't see nothing, that's okay. I mean, morally it might seem like, well, what did they do? Why are they in there? Don't they deserve to be in jail? But when we think about the disabled, pregnant women, the elderly population, and juveniles, which some of whom deserve a second chance, that's something most people can just turn around and say, whatever, it's not a huge deal. But then if you dive deeper into the bill, and I did my best to go deeper into this bill, you start to notice certain other things that you might have to look twice at and say, what? Let's talk about some of those things.
This bill, believe it or not, also contains a prison break provision. It's like a Saturday Night Live sketch. This bill would order the release of every federal prisoner who has asthma, diabetes, or is over 50 years of age, unless the Bureau of Prisons affirmatively proves the inmate in question is likely to commit violence against a specific person. Not in general, against a specific person.
So this bill seems to spiral. First of all, this first provision eats up $500 million of the bill. $500 million. That's money that could definitely go elsewhere. When we look at the healthcare workers and we look at the American people out here struggling, trying to eat, and we thought that the 15% they were giving for food stamps for families that are at an extreme disadvantage dealing with poverty right now, we look at stuff like that 15% and we look at what they're allotting for healthcare workers and essential workers and the $1,200 that they're giving us. And we wanted to cheer about that. But when you look at the $500 million that's being allotted, that's not all they're giving to this whole prison system thing. This is just the first half of what they're doing. $500 million of the $3 trillion is going into the prison systems. And that's not it. The portion that's going to the juveniles is around 75 million. And then there's another 150 million that's going for a whole lot of other things that has to do with inmates as well. Now we know there is a certain portion of that that's going into testing, and that testing is very important because the inmates need to be tested definitely in order to keep the officers safe, in order to keep the visitors safe, the attorney safe, everyone in the legal system that has to go in and out of the prisons. This testing is very important. Also, just because someone is in jail does not mean that they deserve a death sentence from COVID-19. So testing is super important because inmates also need medical care, proper medical care. I mean, we're not in the Stone Ages. We're not saying an eye for an eye. They committed a crime, now they deserve to die a horrible death by COVID. By no means do I think anyone with any compass of morality would say something like that. So testing is super important and medical care is super important. And those provisions for inmates definitely should have been concrete in this bill, which they are. But the extras about releasing inmates and the amount of money that is going to take, $500 million in one provision, $150 million in another, $75 million in another provision, all to go into the prison system for the release of inmates and juveniles. That's a lot of money, Nancy. That's a lot of money. And that's a lot of inmates getting released. Let's look at who they want to release. So let's just talk about the fact that this thing is several pages long. The provisions concerning prisons and jails span so many pages. It starts in the 1600s and then it goes on and on into the 1700s. That's how long this thing is for prisons and jails. Now, let's talk about everyone who they actually want to release. It says the covered health conditions. The term covered health condition with respect to individual means that the individual is pregnant, has a chronic lung disease or asthma, has congestive heart failure or coronary artery disease, has diabetes, has a neurological condition that weakens the ability to cough or breathe, has HIV, or has sickle cell anemia, has cancer, or has a weakened immune system. These are the people that would be covered for early release. And that sounds okay because a lot of these people are vulnerable people. Now it goes on to say a juvenile, a person who is 50 years of age or older, has a covered health condition or is within 12 months of release from incarceration, and includes an individual described in subparagraph A who is serving a term of imprisonment for an offense committed before November 1st, 1987. Now, mostly I'm reading you the facts of the bill because I promised I would not give my opinion, but I would love to hear yours in the comments. Let me know what you think so far about everyone who they might grant release to if this bill passes. So not only does this bill have provisions for releasing the vulnerable population, the elderly and the juveniles, but there are also provisions for releasing those who are being detained right now awaiting trial. So there's a pretrial release clause in this bill, meaning some people have currently been arrested and they can't even go before a judge right now or to get a date for a hearing or a release or to even plead to the crime. or to even have counsel from an attorney, and we all have the right to counsel. And if you have a trial, then you have the right to face your accuser. So certain parts of our judicial system are definitely missing right now. We know that the Supreme Court has been having these kind of virtual hearings, but that's the Supreme Court. They are not doing that for everyday court in your hometown, in your county. That's just something that's not happening every day. So you have these people who might have been arrested for something that's not even major. They're sitting in jail, and a lot of them will sit in jail and continue to crowd up the jails because there is no way that they can just appear before the judge in most places. So what do? So this bill also has motions for pretrial release for some of these people. And again, I said I'm not going to give my opinion. Now, another thing that's in the bill is suspending those probation and parole visits that, you might have a parole officer or probation officer that has to come and visit the inmate when they're released. Right now, another thing in that bill is suspending that. What do you think about that? Let's read. It says suspending the requirement that individuals determined to be a lower risk of reoffending or any other individuals determined to be appropriate by the supervising probation officer report in person to their probation or parole officer. So basically, people who are a lower risk, basically people who have done their time, they don't have any tendencies as viewed by their probation or parole officer to reoffend. They've been reintegrated into society. They've shown no risks of committing any other crimes. They followed all of the rules so far. Basically, the bill is proposing that they stop having to do those visits with their probation or parole officers because they are low risk. The crime they committed, for instance, let's say money laundering, or the crime they committed was some types of tax evasion. Clearly, I mean, what is your parole officer going to do? Come and see if you're staying inside. There might even be a shelter in place order in your community. So some of those visits might be deemed unnecessary. And that's another thing that's in the bill. Again, this part is something that people might be able to turn their heads to, as long as it's for people who are a low risk. But then how do you determine if someone is a low risk or not? There are certain rules and laws in place to have probation and parole officers visit certain people who have been released for this reason. But at the same time, there are a lot of people who have made positive changes and reintegrated into society and may not need these visits. So again, I won't give my opinion, but I'm interested to hear what you think about the suspending of probation and parole officers for low risk offenders. Also, let's read this part. It says suspending the request for detention and imprisonment as a sanction for violations of probation, supervised release, or parole. So basically suspending, they need to be arrested because they violated their parole. Depending on what it was, they want to suspend that. That's also in this bill. Now, this is the part that we all need to read. It says, no individual who is granted placement in community supervision, termination of supervision, placement on administrative supervision, or pretrial release shall be reincarcerated, placed on supervision or active supervision, or ordered detained pretrial only as a result of the expiration of the national emergency relating to a communicable disease. Let me say that again. No individual who is granted placement in community supervision, no individual who is granted termination of supervision, no individual who is placed on administrative supervision, no individual who is placed on pretrial release shall be reincarcerated or placed on supervision or active supervision, or ordered detained, pretrial only, as a result of the expiration of the national emergency relating to a communicable disease. Your thoughts? That's why it's so important to read these bills thoroughly. And good news, House lawmakers will be back in Washington on Friday. They've set the date, Friday. They will begin the vote on this bill. Do you think they should vote yes, or do you think they should vote no? Do you think this bill even has a chance? Would you like this bill to be passed so you can get that $1,200 now? Or would you like to wait to come to a better agreement in terms of money for households instead of large sums of money being allotted to our prison system? All right, guys, that's it for this video, but I'll definitely be back to discuss immigration and a lot of other things that this bill includes large sums of money for. That's it. I'm out.